What time is it? Let me check my watch. Oh, it's bone o'clock. In olden days, a glimpse of femur was only for morbid dreamers, but you're not alone. Bring anything bones. Two goofy gals with deathly interest go on a skeleton inquest in your headphones. Anything bones.
Hello and welcome to Anything Bones. I'm Sophie Schwartz.
I'm Caitlin Hart, and we have a very special returning guest this week. We've got the fabulous dog walker, comedian, podcaster, Grace Penzel. Also best friend.
Friend.
Hello, it's me, best friend Grace. Good to hear you.
Hi, Grace.
Hi, Grace. Thanks for being back on the bone.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm a huge bonehead. I live text Sophie and Caitlin my favorite lines of the podcast every Saturday morning.
I love
when
it.
I wake up.
I love it. You always tell us that you want to wait, because you're in New Mexico, so you're about an hour ahead of us. So you always say you don't want to text too early, but I like a good, my ego loves a good morning compliment.
Yeah, I love to wake up to praise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good morning, you're funny.
Good morning, you're funny. Wake up and smell the podcast success.
Ooh,
Yeah,
speaking of the podcast success.
What a segue that we were both about to make.
Oh, do you want to hit it?
Oh, do I want to hit it? Yeah. So, Grace, since the last time you were on the show, you have a podcast of your own. You want to tell us about it?
Yeah, so it's called Stoner Chicks Podcast, and as a longtime stoner, I met other female stoner improvisers in Seattle when I was living there, and we had an in-person live improv group, Stoner Chicks. And then since we've all been far away from each other and super isolated because of the pando, we decided to start a podcast. And so the first episode came out in early April. We're on, as of this recording, episode 11. It's on every podcast platform, and we just smoke and get real goofy. So check it out if you're into it.
Yeah, and it's fun because there's a little bit of crossover because sometimes you bring like a stoner of the week and you talk a bit of history and you get a little technical like our boneheads like.
Yeah, it's been fun doing a little more research. I mean, obviously we all love MFM, so they do research, and then you guys started doing this podcast and telling these stories. And I don't know, I haven't done research in a long time, and it's really...
It's fun.
Turning up my juices is what I was going to say, but that doesn't make much sense.
The brain
bone
juices.
Bone juices.
Oh,
yeah,
goodness.
I always tell people...
God damn it.
I always tell people that doing research for this podcast is like the best parts of school.
Yeah. Well, it's stuff that you're actually interested in, which is helpful.
Yeah.
Really makes a difference.
And the fact that like you then get to, it's almost like in school when you would give an oral presentation. But I don't know about you guys, but when I was in school, I would put jokes in my oral presentations. Usually that would bomb in class, that were bad puns.
That's okay. You found your fellow punsters. We all appreciate you very much.
Yeah, but I do just remember, I forget what the joke is, but I was in a sociology class, and I was giving a presentation about like Russian female like single mothers, and I had made some joke, not a distasteful one, but it was a pun, and I forget what it was, and my professor just looks at me and goes, "Oh, Sophie."
This was in college or high school?
At Puget Sound.
Oh my god. I feel like I used to make the majority of my in presentation jokes in the like PowerPoint. You know, like it was kind of like a visual joke.
Oh my.
I would have loved to see those PowerPoints. Do you think you still have them somewhere?
Yeah, probably on my Google Drive. I'll run them through for you someday when we really want to get nostalgic about being students.
I did have to go through and like do a big sweep of my Google like Drive, and I went in and found some old presentations from high school, and one was called like The Wonders of Caves. I was like, hey, Sophie, what were the wonders of caves?
That's cool. I don't know if I have my college papers, but anytime there was an essay prompt, I always tried to pick like something that no one else would have done. And so they ended up being kind of serious things like a look into sex addiction or like the persecution of Jehovah's Witnesses in post-Soviet Russia, you know?
I mean, both of those sound fascinating, to be honest.
Well,
Yeah.
Should we get into it? Maybe?
Yes.
Is it time to dive right into our learning?
Y'all, I think it's time to bone down hard.
Let's bone down hard.
Let's bone down hard. Caitlin, you want to lead us into this next segment?
Yeah, so today, Sophie and I are going to tell you a joint story.
And not that kind of joint, Grapes.
Oh man, I was like, where is it? Pass it over here.
I wish.
No, this is a complicated case. It's also a pretty well-known case, at least in the true crime podcasting world. So we felt it was appropriate to tag team. So this is the Somerton Man.
Are you familiar at all?
Who, me? Yeah. Just from My Favorite Murder, to be honest.
Yeah.
I can't remember which one of them told it, but I want to hear it from you, from your lips.
Aw.
Aw.
Sources for this were an article from Smithsonian Magazine, BBC, Wikipedia, CNN, and then really a helpful podcast, Dark Histories podcast, which I've used as a source before on this show. And the host has a very calming British accent. And like, it's like the teeniest bit dry, but it's so good.
His voice is like a silky cheesecake for your ears.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I'm going to take you back to 1948 in Australia, mate.
That was good.
No, it wasn't.
It's staying in.
So, okay. So, it is Tuesday, November 30th, 1948. It's about 7 o'clock on a warm, Australian evening, casual. A man and his wife, his name is John Bain Lyons, and I don't have a name for his wife, so that fucking sucks. Mr. and Mrs. Lyons, they're walking on Somerton Beach, and this is kind of a seaside area. Obviously, it's a beach, and it's a few miles south of Adelaide in Australia. So they're walking towards a place called Glenelg. I'm definitely not saying that right. It's Glenelg. I don't know.
I think you did as best as you possibly could with that.
Glenelg?
I can't remember how the buttery man said it.
I couldn't tell you. Anyway, so Mr. and Mrs. Lyons, they notice that there is a smartly dressed man lying against kind of a seawall facing the beach. He's about 20 yards away from them. His legs are out in front of him, so he's sitting up against the wall, legs outstretched, feet crossed. And I guess as they're walking, he puts his right arm up.
No.
And then weirdly lets it fall back to the ground.
No.
And so they later tell the police that they thought he was drunkenly trying to smoke a cigarette. So about a half an hour later, another couple sees the same man in the same position, and the woman in this other couple can see that he's dressed in a suit with like nice shoes, which is kind of weird for the beach, you know? Like,
Yeah.
if
very
I'm going to
weird
the
for
beach, I don't want a suit. I want as little clothing as possible.
This is getting scarier with every detail.
Good. So he's, at this time that this other couple sees him, he's not moving. His left arm is like out kind of weirdly. And they think that he's probably asleep or like drunkenly passed out. Mm-hmm. And chillingly, the boyfriend jokes that he's maybe dead.
Mm-hmm. It's like when you say something like that, does a little bell go off somewhere? Like,
yeah, yeah. I'm sure, of course, this is not the boyfriend's fault.
no.
He didn't kill this guy, but, you know,
Or did he?
when you make a bad joke, it's like killing somebody.
Yes, when you make a bad joke, it's just like killing someone.
When you make a bad joke, someone somewhere dies.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so Mr. Lyons, he's back. He's, it's the next morning, and he just went for a little swim at the beach, and he sees a bunch of people clustered at the wall where he saw the guy the night before. The guy's in the same position, but he's been discovered as dead. He is dead. There's no sign of any violence, and there is a half-smoked cigarette that's like lying kind of in the coat collar or like the shirt collar, as if he had been smoking it and it maybe fell out of his mouth or something like that. Not sure. So about 3 hours later, he's taken to the Royal Adelaide Hospital. Dr. John Barclay Bennett. John Barclay Bennett. No, that's English. Sorry.
He could have been English, maybe.
He could be anybody.
Third time's a charm. The next time you go to do Australian, it'll come out perfectly.
Flawless, yeah. So time of death is put at no earlier than 2 a.m. that day. They think maybe it's preliminarily, they're like, it's either heart failure or maybe it's poisoning. What is in this guy's pockets? That's a great question from you both.
Caitlin, what's in this guy's pockets? I gotta know.
There are bus tickets from Adelaide to the beach, some chewing gum, which some sources say was juicy fruit, I think. So, hey. He had some matches in his pocket, 2 combs, not 1, but 2. And he had a pack of Army Club cigarettes, which contained
What the fuck is
7
that?
cigarettes of another more expensive brand.
Weird.
See, that's really interesting to me because I don't think I've ever said this on the podcast, but I was a pack-a-day smoker for like 6 years, and you're very particular about your cigarettes. So I think it's really interesting that the brand of cigarettes did not match up the case that the cigarettes were being transported in.
Mm-hmm. Add it to the list, or start the list with this, basically, of things that don't make sense in this goddamn case. And yeah, so is he trying to hide the fact that he's smoking more expensive cigarettes? Why do you need to hide that fact? Like,
yeah, why would you?
Well, it's almost to me says that the cigarettes were either like not bought by him because why would you conceal the brand of cigarettes? Like anytime I would put cigarettes into a different kind of case, it would be either like the end of the pack or cigarettes someone else like gave me when I was like, I'm out of cigarettes, can I have a couple of yours? Wink wink, nudge nudge, make big eyes.
He was sleeping with someone who had fancier cigarettes, and he was like, could I bump one? And she was like, how about 7?
Mm-hmm. Or he.
Sure, or whomever. Go ahead, Caitlin.
so more surprisingly than all of these kind of weird things, there was no wallet, no cash, no ID on this man. Also, none of his clothes had any tags on them. And all but one of the labels on his clothes had been like carefully snipped away. There was also one pocket of his pants that had been neatly repaired with kind of an unusual thread. I guess it was orange. So this guy, who would come to be known as the Somerton Man, and for some reason I always want to say Somerset Man. So if you catch me saying Somerset, fucking tell me to stop.
Well, I've been having a crazy thing because I thought that this was a completely different thing than you're talking about. Because isn't Somerset, wasn't that like it? They discovered one of the earliest human remains that they could find. Do you know what I'm talking about? No. Anyway, I thought that it was like a very, very, very old set of bones.
No, I know. I know exactly what. I feel like I know exactly what you're talking about. You might be thinking of one of these hoaxes, like kind of similarly to what Caitlin talked about with the the concrete giant. I think that there was a. I'll fact check this later for us.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure about it. Maybe later we'll look it up.
Future Sophie, that one's on you. Future Sophie here. I'm not exactly sure what you guys were thinking of. I can't really find a hoax or a Somerset Man that isn't the one we were talking about. But maybe Grace is thinking of the Cheddar Man, who is the remains of a man found in Goth's Cave in Cheddar Gorge in Somerset, England. And he dates back to the Mesolithic period, and he's Britain's oldest complete skeleton. So maybe that's what Grace was thinking of. Expect an appearance of Cheddar Man at some point in the future. Anyway, back to the show!
So the Somerton Man was, quote, well-built. That's nice. He was about 40 to 50 years old, 5'11". He had grayish blue eyes and gingery brown hair with he had a little salt and pepper going on. One of the pathologists that examined him, John Cleland, said, quote, many people who find their way to the morgue have toenails which are dirty and unattended to. His were clean.
Okay.
Tells me that he took care of himself, or, it didn't say anything. I don't think he had a wedding ring on or anything, so they never thought that he was married. This, I think you'll like. His calves were really, well developed and muscular, which people thought was kind of weird given his age. So some people think that he was maybe a ballet dancer. Yeah, it's just kind of an interesting fact. When he was taken to autopsy, they found that his spleen was very big and firm. It was about 3 times the normal size. Jesus. And there was congested blood in his liver, which is not good. I don't know what it all means, but it doesn't sound pretty.
No.
In his stomach, they were able to find his last meal, which was a pasty, which are delicious. Mm-hmm. And there was also blood in his stomach. So all of this kind of taken together tells them maybe it was poisoning, but we're not quite sure. And they, I think, definitively knew that the pasty that he ate wasn't the cause of death.
It was not a poisonous pasty.
So this might sort of have something to do with his weird behavior on the beach that people saw. So raising his arm, seeming like he was maybe drunk or passed out. Could be that he was suffering a lethal dose of poison. But we don't really know because tests were never able to determine the type of poison or what. There is no cause of death for this guy, definitively.
For a second, I was thinking, what, they couldn't get anything? But I guess it was 1948, so they weren't as developed in autopsies.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, in an effort to try to identify who this man is, a full set of fingerprints was taken from him and circulated through Australia and also throughout the English-speaking world. And no one could identify him. So people all over Adelaide start coming to the mortuary to see if they can identify him. And
Whoa.
yeah, which is pretty intense and kind of like we talked about, morgue culture is very interesting. Times that throughout history that they have opened up morgues to the public, are significant. So they were really trying very hard to figure out who this guy was. Mm-hmm. Some people thought that they recognized him from like pictures in newspapers, and others were just, it's kind of sad. There were a lot of people who were families of missing persons who were dragged in to look at this guy, and none of them could identify it. And it just rehashed their trauma, unfortunately. And none of these people in Adelaide could identify him. So by January 11th, the investigation was widened in an attempt to locate any abandoned personal possessions, maybe some luggage or some stuff that he had left behind that might suggest, where he had come from.
Yeah.
Because he had no ID. So this meant that they had to go and check every hotel, every dry cleaner, every lost and found office, and all the different railway stations for miles around, just in case. So on the 12th, detectives went to the main railway station in Adelaide, and they were shown a brown suitcase that had been deposited in the cloakroom on November 30th. So this unclaimed suitcase. The case did contain a reel of orange thread identical to that used in the guy's pockets. But there had been extreme care taken to remove every trace of the owner's identity from these belongings. So all the tags and labels were missing from all of these possessions as well. So if you remember,
the actual fuck.
Yeah, so if you remember, all of his clothes that he was wearing didn't have labels.
The tags, yeah.
And that's very interesting because you can tell a lot from, someone's clothing, their choices of clothing. You know me, I'm always wanting the fashion coverage. So there was a stencil kit that was used by the third officer on merchant ships that was responsible for stenciling cargo, which is a very specific thing. A table knife with the half cut down.
What the fuck
Stenciling.
is a haft, I wonder?
A haft cut down?
Yeah. HAFT.
Oh.
Also, a coat that was stitched using a feather stitch, which is not a common technique in Australia. This is why fashion coverage is important.
The haft is a handle of a knife, axe, or spear.
Okay. So it was a table knife with the handle cut down. So I guess...
More knife, less handle.
More knife, less handle. That's what I am always saying. And then he had this coat that was used with this weird stitch. And so a tailor was able to identify this stitch work as an American technique. And then this suggested that the coat and maybe the person who was wearing it had traveled to the States during the war. But searchers of the shipping and immigration records from across the country again produced no likely hits. There was no one that matched this description. So we've got clothes with all the labels taken off and an American stitching technique. 4 months after this, expert John Cleland discovered a small pocket sewn into the waistband of the dead man's pants.
What the fuck?
I know. Fashion coverage.
But it was brand new. The original people didn't catch it. It was hidden a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Just this really small pocket. So like Caitlin said, previous examiners had missed it, and several accounts of the case had referred to it as the secret pocket. But it seems to have been intended to hold a fob watch. But inside was a tightly rolled little scrap of paper, which when they opened it up had 2 words on it in an elaborate font that said, "To Mom, Shud." So a police reporter, Frank Kennedy, ended up recognizing the words as being Persian, and they figured out that these words are from a copy of a book of poetry called The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. This was a book of poetry that was written in the 12th century and was actually popular in Australia at the time. I know. It's kind of random. I mean, it's extremely random. So this phrase is a reflection on the shortness of human life and kind of the fragility of being a person. And they were able to translate it into basically meaning the end. So this is a very interesting phrase because it could denote that this was possibly a suicide.
Yeah, that's what I had kind of been wondering the whole time. Is this just a guy who's kind of a hipster who went to really elaborate lengths to end his own life? But then what was his goal? Was he going to like wade into the ocean after he took poison? Anyway, this is wild.
Well, and yeah, he wasn't wearing clothes for the beach. Is this little scrap of paper like a suicide note?
Well,
Like,
Right.
I feel like suicide notes are usually meant to be found. Like, that's the thing.
Right.
So why sew it into a tiny pocket of your pants?
I mean, it all feels very like romantic. You know what I mean? It all feels very like well thought out in a sort of fanciful way. I mean, who knows, right? But
Yeah, there's no idea.
that's the vibe I'm getting from the whole thing. It's some sort of like Knives Out mystery.
yes.
Yes, definitely. And the plot thickens.
Okay.
Because
ready.
in July, 8 months after that, they end up finding the book, the specific book that this page is from. In early December, just after the discovery of the body, a guy from Glen, how did we say the?
Glengarry Glen
A guy
Ross.
from the same town near the Somerton Beach comes into the detective's office with a copy of this book. So right around the time the body was found, this man from Adelaide had gone for a drive with his brother-in-law, and he had kept the car parked a few hundred yards from the Somerton Beach. The brother-in-law had found a copy of this book of poetry lying on the floor near the rear seats, and each guy was like, oh, that must be the other guy's book. So neither of them really thought anything about it. But then he saw that there was a newspaper article about it, and so he decided to take a closer look, and they found out by looking at this book that the page that had been torn out was the last page of this book. And they were like, okay, we have to go to the police with this one.
Yeah, I mean, good. That's so fucking weird.
This is the story has so many weird twists and turns, but like, what the fuck? Why did somebody just toss this book into an open car window? Like,
Yeah, because that was part
just
of it.
to get rid of it?
They had just left this car parked by the beach and apparently left the window cracked. Yeah, maybe this guy just walked by after ripping the thing out and was just like, don't need this anymore. I have a book.
Why wouldn't you put it in the garbage, you know? Like, why do you put it in somebody's car? Like, it's like
Because
he
He
wants to
wants
be found out, I think.
It's a scavenger hunt.
Yes.
Well, an ongoing scavenger hunt. So, another clue, the book had a telephone number that was...
Motherfuckers.
No,
Sorry.
it's okay. So it was basically scratched into the back cover of the book like it had been written on like the previous page. And then there were some like other letters, impressions of capital letters underneath this phone number. So the phone number was unlisted, but they figured out that it belonged to a nurse who lived near Somerton Beach.
Sure.
And for a long time, she wasn't publicly identified, which I think is good. And she was known as how do you say that? Jestyn?
Yeah. It's Jestyn.
Jestyn.
But they know who she is because years later the family like gave permission to have her information out there, I believe.
Yeah. And her real name is Jessica Thompson.
Oh, that makes
You
sense.
know Jessica Thompson. She's always on her bullshit.
She's a rascal.
She is.
A wascally wabbit.
So the nurse said that she had given this copy of poetry to a man she had known during the war. And then she gave detectives his name, which was Alfred Boxall. So now we have a name. The only problem with Alfred Boxall was that he was still alive.
Oh.
And he had his copy of the book. So it was not him.
What?
And
though?
Yeah.
And it had the nurse's like inscription that she had written in it. And was completely intact.
Okay. Next clue.
Okay.
So yeah, Alfred is not the Somerton
No.
man.
Right.
Um
Obviously.
But what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, truly. Okay.
So, Jessica Thompson recalled that in the previous year, she really doesn't know the date, but she had come home and she had been told by neighbors that a strange man had come to her house and asked for her. And they were like, let's just show her the cast of, they made a death mask of the Somerton man, of like his head and shoulders. And so they showed it to her, and she had a very strong reaction to seeing it.
What?
Yeah. She
Okay.
looked like she was going to
Why?
faint. I don't know. But she said that she did not recognize him.
Did she say why the fuck she had such a strong reaction to it then?
I think this
No?
is something that people that were there have said
Yeah.
later on.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
like this is,
Well,
I mean, this part I
grain
would
of
say
salt.
is hearsay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's hearsay. But also, like, it is very shocking to see a death mask. I'll just say that.
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
that
fair
would
enough.
make me uncomfortable.
yeah, like, be
Yeah,
like,
all right.
hey, why don't you take a look at this beautiful sculpture of a corpse man, please? It's would be a little shocking. So the letters, so remember the letters that were written under the nurse's phone number?
Yeah.
They were examined under some UV light, and it turned out to be 5 lines of like scrambled up letters.
Word jumble.
Word jumble
Go
for those who
ahead.
like the newspaper. The second line had been stricken out. The first 3 lines were separated from the last 2 lines by a pair of straight lines, like drawn lines, with an X over them. So this is some sort of code, definitely.
I'll post a picture of the code on the Instagram because it's
It's
weird.
hard to
It looks
describe,
weird.
yeah. So the police and the Navy and the general public, no one could crack the code. And this part of the mystery is still very much unsolved. So
You with us so far?
are you with us?
Yeah, I'm just on the edge of my seat.
So, what do we think? I mean, that's pretty much
That's
what
it?
we have to go on. And then,
Okay.
but there are a lot of theories
Sure.
about what's like happened or why. Does anyone have a theory?
I mean, Grape, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think that Alfred is the key, and that somehow this guy knew Alfred and maybe wanted to send sort of message. Maybe they were lovers and Alfred didn't want to dish. He saw the guy's book. He found out about this nurse lady. He made a paper trail into his pants, and then I don't know about the code though. That's weird. But
Yeah,
then he must have like taken poison, and obviously though he must have wanted to be found. There's no way that whether he was murdered or he took his own life, there's no way that he would end up there with tags cut out of his clothes unless he or someone else wanted him to be found.
Well, and another thing I wonder about is like, so did this nurse give a copy of this 12th century book of poems to just like everybody she met?
Maybe
Or, like,
that was her
it
move.
was it significant to her in some way? Or let me get into it. So, or was it a kind of, you know, a plot of spies?
What?
See,
So a lot of people speculate that he could have been a spy.
Oh.
And if you think about it, the label's
It kinda
missing.
makes
No
sense.
cash, no ID, no wallet.
Uncrackable code.
Uncrackable code.
secret pants
mysterious
pockets.
Death.
Yeah.
Yeah, secrets are no fun. Secrets hurt the Somerton man.
Yeah.
So that's a big theory, is that a lot of people think that he was a spy. Maybe, like you said, Alfred was also a spy. Nurse Jessica seems pretty
Suspect.
suspicious. Because her number was in that copy of the book, and she was also connected to this other guy who has a copy of the book. It's very confusing. But sort of one of the main guys who's been taken up, I guess he's taken up the case in most recent history. His name is Professor Derek Abbott. So he's been interested in the Somerton man since like 1995. But in March 2009, he led a team from University of Adelaide who are really interested in solving the case because by cracking the code and getting DNA testing done, because they think that's going to really solve this case.
Yeah.
So this new investigation shows that his main autopsy reports are fucking missing. And the notes from some of the pathologists are not helpful or don't have enough information.
Spy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so stuff is missing. And then a professor of anatomy from the University of Adelaide, her name is, I really don't know how to say this name, Maciej? M-A-C-I-E-J? McKeej?
I don't know.
Professor Hennenberg. Jesus.
Good.
So she or he, I don't know. They look at pictures of the Somerton man. This is in 2009. This professor finds that his upper ear hollow is larger than his lower ear hollow, which is a feature,
of course.
which is a feature that only 1 to 2% of the white population has. So that's kind of weird.
I mean, only 1 to 2% of the population is redheaded. It's not that weird.
Yeah. But we don't have much to go on in
Yeah.
this case, so it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Fair enough.
In the same investigation, they consult with dental experts who agree that the Somerton man had something called hypodontia, which is a rare genetic disorder of the lateral incisors. And this is also something that's only present in about 2% of the population.
He had teensy canines? Is that
I
what
guess.
we're
I don't
saying?
know.
He had
He had some kind of
small
lateral incisor disorder.
Oh, okay.
So we're in 2010, and Professor Abbott gets a picture of Nurse Jessica Thompson's oldest son, who has both of these very rare traits.
Oh shit.
Wikipedia said that the chance that this is a coincidence is estimated between 1 in 10 million and 1 in 20 million.
Well, Wikipedia fucking knows, so.
Yeah.
So this is another theory that Robin, the nurse Jessica's oldest son, he's
boy.
16 months old when the Somerton man dies in 1948. He unfortunately also died in 2009. Robin may have been a child of Alfred or the Somerton man and was just passed off as Jessica's husband's son, because Jessica was also married.
Oh, secret thruple. That's my new theory.
Maybe.
Spy thruple.
So Professor Abbott is a really interesting character, and I'm going to tell you the part of this that actually is kind of heartwarming, but a little bit crazy. So Professor Abbott, like I said, he's been knowing about the Somerton Man, thinking about him since 1995. And he's been the one that's really attached to the campaign to get this body exhumed. Because we have all this new technology now that's going to really change the way that we can investigate it. But Professor Abbott actually is married to one of the people that might be the Somerton Man's granddaughter.
No.
It is. So, this is from CNN, quote, after a single dinner dominated by talk of death and DNA, the pair decided to marry.
Wow.
Oh, so he was
Abbott,
talking...
Abbott,
He was
approached her to try and talk about the case because there's a possibility that she is the Somerton Man's granddaughter, because I believe she's related to Robin Thompson, the possible son of the Somerton Man. I know this is really confusing.
So he was, like, looking at her ears, and then he's like, want to get hitched?
Basically. And now they have 3 children, and the Somerton Man is kind of like a part of their family in a way. They have a picture of him in their kids' playroom.
Wait, what do you mean a picture of him? A picture of the dead fucking body?
Not like, I don't think it's a picture of the dead body, but they did make like pictures of
the death mask is hanging in their child's bed.
I'm sure it's
They've
a
got
picture that an artist did of
Sure.
a recreation of what the Somerton Man probably looked like. I don't know, but it's there.
Also be a mobile made out of the death mask and all the little things they found in his pockets.
Here's a cigarette.
Here's juicy
Here's
fruit.
a little juicy fruit, some matches, some cigarettes for the baby.
And so I'm going to have Sophie tell you why we chose this story, because there's been a development.
Yes.
What is
We
it?
got a little bit of breaking news. So the exhumation of the Somerton Man took place May 2021.
Oh.
So he was buried in West Terrence Cemetery. He has been buried there since 1949, and his headstone reads, "The Unknown Man."
Whoa.
Yeah, so this is a quote from Vicky Chapman, who is the South Australia Attorney General, and she says, quote, "For more than 70 years, people have speculated who this man was and how he died." So she said that the decision to exhume the body was heavily influenced by, quote, "intense public interest in the case." And I would say, I agree, I have an intense public interest in it.
Well, and that just tells you, I mean, if you make a stink about these unsolved cases, it does make a difference sometimes, because, people like Abbott and his team and all the people of Adelaide that want to know who this guy was and give him a name and some peace. It's really captured the public's attention, and it's like, yeah, it's fucking time to get that body out of the ground and throw some DNA magic on it.
Yeah, like CSI came out over 20 years ago. What are you doing?
So when the crews go to dig up the gravesite, there's local news there. 9 News reported that initial efforts had moved very slowly because there was a lot of dense clay in the soil, and they also didn't know if he had been put in a coffin or not, which
They could not tell?
no.
They didn't
know.
They didn't
Like-
know what they were dealing
Like
with.
there wasn't a record that said,
Was he
well,
put in a coffin?
I think he was in a coffin, because it said that he was excavated, like using a little brush and spatula, and they carefully exhumed the remains, and then they placed it in a new coffin. So that implies that he was in a coffin before, but they put him in a different coffin to transport him to the Forensic Science Center, which I would love to have been there on that day.
Cool. So now they're figuring out new stuff about
Yes,
him.
exactly. Authorities say that if there is sufficient DNA, they can make an attempt to identify this man and where he came from. So, science is finally behind this one. So this case is part of Operation Persevere, which is attempting to put names to all unidentified remains in South Australia, which is a very noble thing to do. And since the exhumation, Professor Abbott's wife, Rachel Egan, has decided to move the painting of the dead man out of the baby place.
Professor Abbott's wife is like, okay, let's get this creepy painting out of the playroom and let's put it in my husband's office so that it'll be a reminder of this kind of weird thing that brought them together, and now they have this beautiful family. But she's like, I don't need this in the playroom looking at me all goddamn day.
Fair enough. I mean, I think it was kind of weird to begin with, but hey, Rachel, do your thing.
So Rachel, Abbott's wife, says that the Somerton man's always going to be an important part of their family's folklore, and she hopes that their kids are going to tell their kids the story because it's how they met. And now that the exhumations happened, they're kind of having to have these tough discussions with their kids, because what if science tells us that he's not related to them and they've just had this guy's painting in their house for a really long time?
Or that he's a bad dude.
Yeah. Rachel says, quote, "What if he was somebody who wasn't nice?" Oh, she sounds cute.
Yeah.
At the moment, we feel very protective towards him. That positive spin could well change if we find out that Mr. S was not a savory person, end quote. Although, she said it would give them a new mystery to solve.
Yeah, fair enough. I like that she calls him Mr. S, too. It's that's grandpapa to you. That's crazy.
Yeah, so that's the
really
Somerton man.
interesting.
Hopefully,
Somerton man.
sometime soon it'll be solved.
Yeah.
You guys should keep us updated on that.
We will. If there's any breaking bone news. Bone-breaking news, I actually like better.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, next item on the bone agenda is the jackalope. And so what happened is I was listening to your episode with Kayla Teal, who's another stoner chick, and Sophie was talking about the Fiji mermaid and talking about how it was kind of a falsified cryptozoological find. And there's obviously a lot of sort of cryptozoology going on in the Southwest in general, but one that I kind of grew up knowing about is the jackalope, which in basic terms is a portmanteau of jackrabbit and antelope.
Oh my
but
God.
There's, oh yeah, Caitlin, you've never heard of it.
No, I never have.
Okay, so Caitlin, there is this fake legend of the jackalope, which is half jackrabbit and half antelope.
I
That's
have to ask.
Yes.
Is P.T. Barnum involved in this motherfucker?
No, P.T. Barnum is not involved in this. Another
Thank God.
somewhat sinister scientist is involved, but
Okay. I just couldn't take it if we had to deal with P.T.
Go back in time and punch that asshole.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. He comes up every once in a while on this podcast. You'd be surprised.
He's a true butthead. Okay, so here we go. So this is about the modern jackalope. These are the legends. So most of the sightings are from the Midwest, a lot in Wyoming and New Mexico. My sources for this are kind of far-reaching. I watched specifically a lot of YouTube videos, but I'm going to have Sophie and Caitlin put those links in the notes. Basically, this is a rundown of some parts of the legends. Supposedly, they have red glowing eyes. Ooh. Supposedly, their fur is really prized for being extra soft. They, according to cowboys in the good old days could perfectly mimic human speech and throw their voices to avoid detection. So like these cowboys would be sitting around the campfire and be singing, and then they would hear the singing mirrored back to them from the jackalope.
That's like a Jabberjay. I just watched The Hunger Games, and that's giving me Jabberjay vibes.
Or like that one vampire in Twilight. Anyway.
Oh my god, that's a deep cut.
Jeff and I have been watching the Twilight movies. That's the only reason that I said that.
Oh, anytime we can get some Twilight on this podcast, I'm for it. I read all those books as a youth, and
As did I.
they don't ever really leave you.
Nope.
No, I had read the books, but I haven't seen the movies, and they're fucking buck wild. Okay, so back to the jackalope. Apparently, you could use whiskey as bait to attract them because they love whiskey. Snake oil salesmen could have claimed that the jackalope milk, which what the actual fuck, is magical, curative, or even aphrodisiac.
Ew.
Hey, baby.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So it's a rabbit and and an antelope. Which end is is
Okay.
which? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Let's get a picture.
Let's get a picture going. Okay, so this is supposed to be... Okay, yeah. So this is the jackalope.
I'm sorry.
I love it. It's so cute.
And they have some really good Photoshop. Well, or is it?
Is it?
Yeah, because some of these I believe. And then,
Oh my God.
you see something like that.
Oh yeah, so they made a false news story at the Santa Fe University of Art and Design, RIP, where they were interviewing students being like, I saw a jackalope on campus. So there's like infrared footage.
Amazing.
Stop. That is a rabbit with some little antlers, like,
So,
on a headband.
Rabbit body, big antlers.
Got it. I was picturing something else, so I'm really glad
Oh
we
my
got
god.
a little bit
Look
of
at
clarity.
Wait a second. Look at that big
No.
cut
Don't
one.
look at it yet. No, don't look at it yet. Don't look
The
at it
one
yet.
that was fucking shredded.
Oh, is there a very strong boy? Oh,
Yeah,
this
look
one.
at the furries have gotten to this one. Look at that.
Oh, that is a built little... Oh, it's a drawing.
Yeah, it's a
but
drawing,
sure.
but it's fucking... Caitlin, remember this one and put this hella stacked jackalope on our Instagram.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to remember this
Yeah,
bad boy.
a drawing as opposed to all the other images that are real life.
Yes,
Well, yeah, because there are no limitations with your imagination.
as
Right,
we learned
exactly.
last week.
Okay. All right, so that's generally what a jackalope looks like. So
Thank you.
Obviously, hearing about the mythology, sorry to roll my voice, but like cryptozoology, there's a lot of people who very much take it seriously, as you know, in terms of like Bigfoot hunters and stuff like that. People who take these things like very seriously. So there's a lot of elaboration on lore that I'm like, I think you just made this up for the purpose of this podcast or whatever. But supposedly they're very aggressive when provoked. This is the general sort of lore about it. The origins of the legend of the jackalope actually go all the way back to like ancient times in the 13th century. So supposedly they found Persian and Arabic texts that were like graphic dictionaries from the 1200s that depicted rabbit with a unicorn-esque spike sticking out of its head. And there was also legend surrounding Alexander the Great, maybe even finding a mythical rabbit with a horn on some island, unknown island. So
That's wild.
the lore around it is pretty old. Also, some people say that it can be connected to the people of the Peyote Huicol, which was in Central America, and a deity called the Kayumari, or the blue deer, which supposedly received its antlers as a gift from a rabbit. And this god was supposed to be sort of like a trickster god. That seems like a more loose affiliation, but it is mentioned. And then starting in the 1600s in Europe, so the 16th, 17th, and 18th century, this thing that's considered now fictional called the Bavarian Wolpertinger, which was like a horned rabbit. So kind
of similar.
So kind of similar. So ideas about these things stretch back a really long time. However, where this myth probably originated in North America was from these two dudes in Douglas, Wyoming in 1933 who had gone rabbit hunting, and somehow the corpse of the rabbit ended up on the floor next to some deer antlers. And they were like, haha, wouldn't it be funny if we did some rogue taxidermy and glued the antlers to this rabbit and mounted it on a plate to be hung somewhere like a trophy. And so they did that, and it's kind of became a fad. They ended up launching a business around it. They sold, I think, the original one to a Douglas, Wyoming hotel. These boys, by the way, were Douglas and Ralph Herrick.
Douglas from Douglas?
Dougie from Dougie. So then jackalope heads started to be shown in sideshows and carnivals, and these days you can find them on Amazon for $10 if you want. So basically it's not hard to fabricate these things, but since Douglas, these Herrick brothers started doing this, it kind of came into the public conscience. The way that I thought that this was appropriate for anything bones is I wanted to talk about the antlers, which are bones. Here's the thing. Most of the antlers that are depicted on these jackalopes are not actually antelope antlers. They are like deer or elk antlers, in style, at least.
Yeah.
So I looked into the difference between horns and antlers a little bit. Would you like to know?
Yes. I was also going to say, like, because I think you'd have to just cut off, like, you'd have to have just the tip of an antler. Because a rabbit is smaller than a deer or an antelope, right? So, like,
yeah,
you might just have to, it's just, the proportions are all off, but somehow these artists make it work.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, the proportions are kind of all off. So antlers are bones. They're shed every year at the end of a mating cycle. They're covered in a material skin called velvet. Ooh. And I think that actually does still have some blood vessels and stuff. So they grow at a rate, this guy who's a taxidermy guy was telling me all about it. They grow at a rate of an inch to a couple inches every day, making them the fastest growing bone in the world.
Wow.
An inch?
Yes.
A day?
Yes, or at least that's what this old guy said.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. That is fast.
Mm-hmm. It's really fast. They grow differently depending on the kind of animal that's growing them. They can have spikes that then fork out into like however many prongs or points that they would eventually have over the course of their life. Then we've got horns. So if you're thinking of like goats, that sort of thing, horns are made out of material similar to fingernails. They grow throughout the life of the animal and are not shed. And the growth marks, kind of the changes in color of horns, are actually the hair itself. Whatever color the hair is, changes and solidifies into these horns. So the horns, however, are grown from what's called a core, which is a bone stub that's hollow, porous, and full of veins. So essentially you've got the bone bony core, and then as like a base, and then the horns grow on top of it, right?
Whoa.
So that all said, pronghorns, which are commonly known here as antelopes, are not actually the same animals. So they call them antelope horns. However, the kind of animal that kind of looks like an antelope in Africa and those regions, they do have horns, but an antelope ain't that.
Okay.
So antlers are actually pronghorns. And pronghorns are not like deer, and they're not like goats. They're actually from the family Antilosapridae, and they're the only surviving species from that family. So they're indigenous to Central and Western North America. They're colloquially known in North America as the American antelope, the prongbuck, or simply antelope. So basically, during the Pleistocene epoch, there were about 11 others of these antelocaprid species, but the rest of them are extinct. And they're closer to, like, giraffes. So when you think about the little horns that are on giraffes, it's closer to that. Each horn of the pronghorn is composed of flat, slendered blades of bone, which grow from the frontal bones of the skull or from the subcutaneous tissues of the scalp that form a permanent core, kind of like the core for horns, but these are antlers. If that makes any sense.
It does.
Skin covers the bony cores, but in the pronghorn, it turns into a keratin, sheath, which is shed and regrown annually. But unlike the horns of deer and elk and stuff, the horn sheaths are pronged and branched, and they have forward pointing tines. They're also the fastest land mammal in the Western Hemisphere and can run 35 miles per hour for 4 miles or 55 miles per hour for half a mile.
Damn.
While they're often cited as the second fastest land animal after the African cheetah, it can sustain higher speeds for longer than cheetahs. And in part, this is because they have an extremely light bone structure and hollow hair. So I just wanted to explain the antelope a little to you, because I didn't know any of that. And
no, I didn't. But it is also funny to try and picture a rabbit when you're talking about all of this.
Yeah. Exactly. And so, oh God, and jackalopes are so cute, but I didn't know any of this. So I think that usually the types of horns that are depicted are more like deer horns, but antelopes also have horns, but they're different because there's literally no other species at all like the antelope in North America. I just think that's so sick.
Yeah, that's fascinating that out of those 12 different species, we still have this last one.
Right. It's very special. Oh, speaking of which, one time a British tourist was trying to take back a jackalope head in her luggage, and it got confiscated because the British, like TSA or whatever, customs people thought that it was a protected species that she had, like, hunted.
Oh my God. Yeah, bitch, stop shooting our jackalopes.
Stop shooting the jackalopes. Okay, so, however, is there a kind of real scientific foundation or explanation for the origin of the jackalope? And the answer is kind of.
Yes.
Basically, this dude, Shope, who now I can't remember his first name.
Doesn't need one. That guy's wife didn't get a name.
Yeah, that one guy's wife didn't get a name. I don't know what his first name is. Sorry, everybody. All right. Anyways, there was a doctor named Shope, and he went on a hunting trip, and someone, I think, found a supposed jackalope, and it did have these bony-looking protrusions, but more out of its mouth. And this is where it gets a little sad. Basically, they're benign tumors, and it's this specific condition that's unique to rabbits. And what it was found to be, what it's named now, is Shope's papillomavirus. And of course, you'll recognize papillomavirus from human papillomavirus, which is a virus that causes tumors and warts, basically wart-like tumors to happen. So he did experiment on live rabbits by giving them this virus, and sure enough, they grew these quote-unquote horns, and it did have a cellular structure like a wart or a tumor, like I already said. But the cool thing about it is that it helped to prove the theory that cancer can be caused by viruses. And a scientist, Francis Peyton Rouse, took off on Shope's initial findings and won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1966 for this discovery.
Wow.
Cool.
And so I can show you a picture of what Shope's papillomavirus looks like, which is kind of a bummer, but you can see why people would have thought that they looked like horns, which is this guy right here. Yeah. So
Poor bunny.
yeah. So we're looking at these terrible growths, and it is ultimately fatal. It's just, yeah, okay. So it's really gross, basically.
So he injected them with the rabbit equivalent of HPV, and
Yeah.
then they get a bunch of horns all over their little rabbit face.
Yeah, a bunch of benign tumors, but, you know.
Where is Gardasil in all this?
Yeah.
I want 3 shots for every rabbit.
For every rabbit.
Those shots hurt like a bitch.
Oh, yeah, they
but
did, but God, am I thankful.
So this is a supposed sighting that I'm going to show you of a jackalope from July 23rd, 2008, in the Twin Cities. Are you ready?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, God. Okay, this is the supposed sighting. And
Oh,
as you
wow.
can see, there are those sort of bone-like protrusions on this little bunny. And it kind of looks like a unicorn horn, almost.
Yeah. Oh, there he goes. Oh.
So, this buddy hopefully doesn't feel too bad. But, yeah. And this wild music. Sorry if that's in it. It probably is. Sorry. Okay, so now you've seen the jackalope. The supposed jackalope. So, it has continued in pop culture, and as this one guy liked to say, where there's fire, there's smoke, but sometimes with so much smoke, it's hard to find the fire. In other words, you know, there is kind of maybe this truth, but then there's so many legends around it that it's sort of hard to know what's actually real. What there is a lot of fanfare around it in Douglas, Wyoming. The Wyoming Parks Department actually issues fake jackalope hunting licenses to tourists.
Ha!
And in Wyoming, they've tried to have the jackalope deemed as their official state mythical creature. That hasn't passed the House yet, unfortunately. But at Wyoming State University, they do have a jackalope mascot called YOLO. I don't know why. And it has been depicted in Scooby-Doo. There's a Jackalope Ranch in California, a terrible news segment where this guy is really pretending, the owner of the place is really pretending that jackalopes are real and talking about their domestication and shit like that. And in Santa Fe, there is a store and market called Jackalope that has been here since I was little, and I've been going to a whole bunch. I showed Sophie a picture of the sculpture that they have the other day, but I'll send it. They have a big jackalope sculpture, and leading up to recording this, and I'll send them in the mail soon, maybe you guys can take pictures of them, I got 2 little jackalope figurines.
I love
Oh my god, I love them. Oh, Grace.
Oh, Grace.
Oh, Grace, those are adorable. Oh my god, thank you.
I love them.
They're so cute.
2 little fuzzy little jackalope figurines to send to my bony ladies.
Oh
Aw.
my god, I will.
To have.
I will treasure that.
Oh,
Yeah.
every time I pick it up, I'm gonna think about the bony core.
The bony core. And so yeah, I think that that's pretty much all I wanted to tell you about the jackalope. What do you guys think?
That was not at all what I was expecting.
What were you expecting?
I certainly didn't think there was any kind of like historical or scientific evidence
Right.
to say, yeah, this actually
Yeah.
kind of does happen.
Yeah,
That surprised me quite a bit.
that was wild. I didn't have any idea that there was any sort of scientific truth to it. It's, you know.
Yeah, and it's a similar phenomenon, those tumors, to some things you'd see. I don't know if you ever saw, like, in the Guinness Book of World Records, there's the, like, tree man, quote unquote, that
Yes.
has, like, growths all over him. So it's a similar thing where cells start, reproducing out of control.
So, I think the only thing I was confused about was, so these horns, were these caused by a lab, or can they also occur in nature?
No, so they occurred in nature, and then that phenomenon was observed by this dude who got, like, told the legend of the jackalope.
Got it.
And someone was like, see, look, this here's a jackalope. And he was like, I'm a biologist, and I think that's something else.
Got it. So
yeah.
nobody is injecting rabbits with HPV anymore.
Not anymore. I hope not.
I sure hope not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I sure hope not. The poor things. But yeah. Anyways, I learned a lot doing the research for that, and as it turns out, it had more to do with bones. Because for a second, I was like, oh no, antelope horns are horns, not antlers, and so it's not bone, but it is bone.
Yeah.
Still bones.
Still bones. Hey, at the end of the day, still bones.
Anything bones.
Well, thank you so much for coming back to the Bone Podcast. We loved having you on again.
Yeah. And there's only one thing we have left to ask you.
What's that?
What's Grace's bone of the week?
My bone of the week is actually just like your nose, like the nose part of your skull. Not the nose because I know that's cartilage, but the
nose hole?
bone
Oh, okay.
up here at the top, like the bridge of your nose, because it's different on everyone. I have a pretty prominent one that affects the way that sunglasses sit on my face, and I just think it's an interesting part of the skull.
Yeah. It's underappreciated part of the skull.
Well, everyone, go ahead and subscribe to Stoner Chicks Podcast wherever you listen.
Yeah, thank you. Please, we have new episodes on Fridays. So you've got Friday Stoner Chicks, Saturday Anything Bones. Get you a great weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to have some good times and you're going to learn something. God damn it.
God damn it for once.
I love you guys. Oh, sorry. I love you guys so much. Thank you for having me on. I
Yeah.
miss you, dads, and I can't wait to see you in person later this year.
Yeah, we love you. You're the best. Thank you for our jackalopes.
Jackalopes, expect those in the mail.
Yes.
Exciting. And all I have left to say, and we should all say it at the same time if we can,
Okay.
is
Bon
voyage.
Excellent.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to Anything Bones. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Anything Bones Podcast, or email us at anythingbonespodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you to Nick Kruger for our spooky music and Stephen Vetteroff
At Chubby Scrubby on Twitter,
for our jazzy vocals, and thank you to Camilla Franklin
at Camilla Strader on Instagram.
for our beautiful bony artwork. Please rate, review, and subscribe. He had small teeth